Hey everyone, look who I found outside of my house. He was wandering around. I'm not sure what he was doing on the East Coast, but he's here. Wes Plate. You're in California, right, Wes?
I'm actually up in Washington State, north of
Washington
Seattle.
State. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about that. So, what's happening in Washington State?
Oh, well, we're just enjoying summertime. I read a piece of news this morning that we're currently in our 21st longest ever in history streak of no rain. It feels for us like there's been no rain in a very long time. I think we're like 30 something days or something. I don't know the number, but you think that it rains all the time here, but the summertime's actually kind of dry. And it's been quite dry. Of course, we had historic heat of 110 degrees or something like that a couple weeks
R-
ago. So
right.
we're just, the whole West Coast is having quite a bit of heat, and so we're enjoying that here as well. But yeah,
Right.
everything's going really well, having a good
Yeah,
time.
well, this is about the time. Typically, when we go to the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit, that you guys start your fire season,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Because in 2019, I think that's the last time that I met you in person. They told us to wear masks, to bring masks if we're sensitive to smoke,
That's
and
right. That's right. The smokes that year was awful.
it was, and that was the first time I heard of an N95 mask. This is pre-pandemic. And I
That's
said,
right.
N95, I think I have some of this because I've been in construction for years. So I had a couple boxes of N95 masks. I used to wear them when we would sawdust, prevent sawdust, from breathing it in. So we got some comments. We got a comment from our friend Jari Innanen from Finland, I believe. Hello, Richard and Wes.
Oh,
And some
nice.
other comments. Hello from Abu Dhabi.
Truly a worldwide community you got here, Richard.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's I don't sell anything. I've been doing the Final Cut Pro radio podcast this is my 6th year, and that's what this grew out of. It grew out of that podcast because I started streaming live. It actually in 2016 was the very first Creative Summit. We're going to talk about the Creative Summit specifically for what's going to happen this year, as much as I know. But in 2016, I started streaming live to Facebook. That was the very first time. This is about 215 live streams that I've done on Final Cut Pro. Okay, because I do other local ones that, local parades and things as well. But as far as Final Cut Pro, this is about 210, 215 live streams. And it's dedicated to Final Cut Pro. It's not generic. It's not this and that. It's just, no, it's Final Cut Pro centric, always Final Cut Pro centric. Lee, got a
Yeah,
couple
that's
more
great.
comments. Yeah. Lee Lewis, hello from Philly. Jacob
Hi,
Rush,
Lee.
hello there. A lot of
Hey,
people
Jacob.
watching.
That's
So,
great.
yeah, it is. It's been very interesting working with these live streams and interviewing people. And like the last time you were on, it's been 3 years, probably 4 years. You were on Final Cut Pro Radio before I did live streaming. Before you went to
Yeah, it would
Apple.
have been. That's right, because I was at Apple for about 4.5 years, so it would have probably been about maybe 5 years ago. Maybe it was when we last spoke on the show there.
Okay. Okay, let me just check this off. I forgot one thing. I have little snitch running. You know what that is?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I have it running and it keeps alerting me that I'm trying to, I got to put it on, what is it called? The green mode. Silent mode, allow connections, because it keeps popping up. Hey, somebody's, the software that I use, now I can show you. This is the software that I'm using. This is what I'm monitoring. Oh, there we go. This is
Oh,
my
okay. Oh, wow.
screen. Yeah. So I have a preview monitor, program monitor. I have a web page up, and these are all the panels that I have, audio and comments and things. This is what I have to monitor when we're going live. I need an assistant,
Yeah, you do.
intern or something. Not really. This is about the limit of what I can do. This is why I'm hoping for a larger iMac screen, like a 32-inch or something, because I have 34, and this is about as small as I can get. I don't know how people get down to a 13-inch MacBook Pro. I just don't I don't understand that. I mean, sometimes people get MacBook Pros and they get an eGPU and they get a separate monitor. And I say, well, that's an iMac. You just
That's right.
created
Yeah.
a modular iMac instead of the iMac being all in one. You have all these different pieces. But
The
I have
advantage
Mac.
is you can take that to your couch, once in a while, that's basically what I did is I got the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro. And if I want to do anything real serious with it, I connected up to my LG 5K display, and now I've got lots of screen space and have external keyboard and trackpad, and now it's like you said, it's basically a desktop computer at that point. But it is nice once in a while to be able to go on the road or go sit on the couch or get away from the desk with the thing.
No, absolutely. It absolutely is. When I have a 2019 Mac Pro that I saved for, people say, hey, why'd you get one? Well, I started saving in August. I created a fund, a Mac Pro fund, and I started saving and saving, saving. So December came around and I had the funds for it. Wasn't a problem. So it worked out well. And this is my favorite Mac of all time, but I am looking forward to getting a 16-inch MacBook Pro, the new version, the M1X or the M2. Did you see? So I report on a lot of things. Matter of fact, we're going to talk about one of the comments that you made on Twitter because I found it kind of funny. But did you see that after WWDC, they found keywords in the upload to Apple, the official Apple keynote that had M1X MacBook Pro?
Oh no, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, somebody went on the YouTube channel and they found the keywords that said M1X MacBook Pro and M1X. So it seems like something happened, but I'm not asking you to comment, but I'm just saying it seemed like something happened that they were possibly going to announce because the keywords were in there, and then something happened, whatever, supply, whatever they'd figured out, then they didn't show it. Somebody said it was funny because they had the keywords in the keynote for the YouTube channel. So this guy says, Ecamm with the Dell widescreen 38 inch is amazing. So I got a 34 inch, and I might go a little bit bigger next time because I have a side vertical monitor too, which you can't see.
Vertical monitors are the great way to go. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to tell you about, let me see. So I found let me see, I got so many screens I got to turn here. Where is that? Oh, I found a typo in one of your tweets.
Oh, well, let's fix that right away.
So I fixed it for you. So this is your...
Oh, oh, is that what I typed? Did I type 25.6?
No, I changed it to 25.6 because there's no way that could have been 256 miles.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. So I fixed it. So there you go. I fixed it right there. 25.6 miles.
Oh, actually, there's another, now that you're pointing this out, there is another typo. It's Black Canyon City, not Black Canton City.
Ah.
So I've got mistakes all over this tweet.
Well, so this is what you've been doing. You actually ran 256 miles. Was it 4+ days?
Yeah, it took me about 4.5 days.
So during a normal day like that, how much do you sleep, rest, versus actually run?
Yeah, well, during an individual day, out of those 4.5 days, I slept on average just over an hour per day. Generally, over the course of that entire race, the 4.5 days, I slept a total of 6.5 hours. And so sleeping is a real challenge in an event like that. I mean, honestly, the entire thing is a challenge. I recognize how ridiculous it is for me to say that. Yeah, the sleep is the challenge, but the entire thing is obviously really hard. But what makes it hardest is the fact that after a few days, we are just not only physically tired, but due to the lack of sleep, we're just mentally exhausted. And that makes it just tremendously more difficult than you can imagine. So the very first day, I didn't sleep at all. It wasn't until I think it was the evening of the second day, maybe about 9 o'clock at night on the second day of running is when I slept for like my first 15 minutes. And then I think maybe 12-ish hours later, I slept another 15 minutes. And then the third night, after running about 180 miles, I finally slept for 3 hours. And that was like my first real sleep that I did. But yeah, sleep is something that I kind of do when it feels right. In this particular race, I ended up waiting a little bit too long and was feeling pretty rough as I approached that third night. But yeah, it is true. 256 miles from just north of Phoenix, a place called Black Canyon City, up to Flagstaff. It was the first, it was the inaugural year of this particular race. So it'll be happening again next year. Hopefully, it'll become an annual event. But it was fun to be a part of the very first one.
So, how many people actually completed this?
That's a great. Actually, I think if you show the details on that page, I think the I have in the notes there. I finished 24th. Is that right? 34th. I can't remember that detail. Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. At the very top, if you scroll back up a little bit, uh, finish time 104 hours and 53 minutes. 108 people finished the race, and I was, as I say, 34th. So 170 something people started. About 70 or so dropped out of the race, and most of those people ended up dropping out within the first 50 miles. The very first 30 miles of this race were some of the hardest running that any of us had ever done. Some people were saying that the first 50 kilometers of this race were harder than any 100-mile race or 50-mile race that people had done before. It was tremendously challenging. So what we're looking at here, this is actually a documentary that I made because one of the things that I have started doing over the years is I got into this kind of running, but I also decided that it was fun to share the experience with other people through video. Um,
Absolutely.
but but having I come from a background as being an editor, and I've always enjoyed shooting as well. So I run with a GoPro and just try to document what's happening along the way, and talk to the camera once in a while to share with how I'm feeling or share where we're at, what we're doing. When I get to aid stations, at a large race like this, I have a crew that helps me out. So my partner
Right.
Leah
Right.
is she's my main crew chief. She is there to help take care of me and make sure that my feet are taken care of. While I'm eating, I'll sit down at an aid station and start eating to get some calories in me. And
Sure.
while I'm doing that, my crew is taking care of my gear, taking care of me and like my feet, for example. And so anyway, also at the aid stations, some of my crew will have their iPhones out and will be videotaping me at the aid station. So I always have a great opportunity after the race is done to relive the entire experience of the race through video, through the GoPro stuff that I shot, the iPhone stuff that my crew shot, put it all together and tell a little story. And so yeah, I have a video on my YouTube channel of this particular race, which has been a lot of fun for people to be watching.
So we got a comment from Michael Kamas, tech and English in today's episode, talking because we did the corrections of your tweet. Smart
Thanks for
ass.
watching today, Michael. Good to see you. That's right.
So you shot. So how many hours did you shoot a video for those hours those 4 days?
I probably shot about 3 hours of video total, something
Okay.
like that. Um, and then I probably had an additional, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour worth of iPhone footage to include as well. What I did is when I got back home and started to work on the project, my workflow was to import everything into Final Cut. I would tag the individual cameras with a keyword so I would know
Okay.
where it came from. Sometimes I might want to look for specifically just the GoPro stuff that I shot, or if I know that there was something shot by Leah's iPhone, I could, really quickly go to the sidebar and just click on the keyword. I had another guy, there's a brand called Path Projects that makes the running shorts that I love to wear.
Okay.
And one of the representatives I'm an ambassador for that company. And so one of their representatives was at the race to take video and photos of me and a couple of the other runners who are ambassadors for that brand. So I had another guy who had all kinds of video and photos of me running. So that was just another source that I had for this thing. So having keywords as a way to help differentiate the sources was really helpful for me. And then I just went through basically and started off by favoriting everything. So
Okay.
uh, I don't like to dump everything into the timeline and then throw out the bits that I don't want. I kind of want to work more additively, I guess. I want to just look at all the
Right.
footage, mark the bits that I like, and then add those bits to the timeline. So I generally go through all my source material, marking favorites of the parts of the clips that I think that I might want to use. I put all those favorites onto the timeline, and then start trimming things down, start trying to reduce it as much as I can while
Right.
still, telling the story.
Right.
So
Do you rename your favorites? Because that's typically what I do. I'll actually rename them so they mean something to me rather than just being a favorite.
I actually don't, because in these particular projects that I'm doing, my only goal with the favoriting is just to find the bit that I'm likely to use. Once it's on the timeline, then I can trim it shorter, trim it longer. I don't necessarily need to know what it's named. I'm unlikely to go back to the browser and need to know why I favorited something and have any context for it.
Okay.
So for this particular project also has the advantage of being very, very, very linear in how the story's told. There isn't a lot of non-linear B-roll, for example, where I'm taking something shot on day 3 as B-roll for something that I'm talking about on day 1. If you
Sure.
see me talking, usually you see me talking, but even if there's B-roll over me while I'm talking, it's very likely that that B-roll was actually the exact same camera clip. It's just I had the camera pointing at me, while I talked, and then I rotated the camera around to show what I was doing. And so that same clip is essentially just been cut up and overlaid on top of itself. But I had that advantage of everything is very, very linear.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I love that feature of Final Cut, the ability to favorite things first
Yep.
and basically have persistent ranges that sit in the browser forever, that you no matter what you do with your in and out marks in the browser, or your selection ranges, you could always get back to those favorite ranges. And I don't think there's any other NLE that I'm aware of. Certainly I've tried using Premiere in that same way. Like I want to be able to just mark the bits that I like first. And you can subclip in Premiere, sure, but that's not quite the same as having a clip where you can see the entire range that you shot, and then like green line, green line, green line, just the little subsections that you actually think within the context of the entire clip that are favorites. I just love that so much. And then the ability to only show the favorites, to filter down to them. Yeah, it's just really powerful way to work, I think.
Well, that's see what you just said. You filter by their favorites, and I look at the names of the favorites. So a descriptive name,
Yeah.
whatever, and I can look at all the descriptive names of the favorites, and I can pick the one I want, whatever. That's why I rename them. I use that all the time. Now, I don't do that all the time. People ask, I just answered a question this last week. People say, well, how do you work your library? Where's your storage and stuff? And I always tell them the same thing. If I'm doing something short, small project, or something that's not really that important, I just leave it inside the library. But big, important projects, especially like documentaries are going to be lasting for years, I organize the footage in the Finder in folders, and I rename, and I'll sometimes, if I can, I'll rename clips. Then I import that into a Final Cut. So that's external. Anything more important, that's what I do. And that's what, when we're at the FCPX Creative Summit all the time, when we see these people that have done major films, that's what they do. They start in the Finder organized. They have to.
Yeah.
And then they import it. So I do both ways, depending on what kind of a project it is.
Yeah, I think I do the same thing. There's sometimes I just really quickly hop into Final Cut to edit together a screen recording or something that I want to send
Right.
to somebody to explain a problem, right? And it's like, okay, I'm building this library for this purpose. As soon as I'm done sharing out the video, the library's done and worthless. So it's nice to have one thing to delete, and that all the media associated with it is also gone. But yeah, I do the same thing. I create a folder structure. I'm not very strict about what's in the folder structure. I know some
Right.
people might use a third-party app to sort of create the exact same folder structure for every project, but I have a folder that contains the project that I'm working on. Of course, I'm talking about like the big project, not
Right.
the
Right. Of
timeline
course.
project. So I'll have a folder for that project, and then within that folder, I start to separate things out. Like I'll have a folder of media, and then I put all my media in there that's also organized. Each person's iPhone goes into a set folder. The GoPro footage goes into a folder. I also create a lot of animations in my videos, and so I'll have a place where I create those documents. And yeah, I try to keep everything out of the library as much as I can, because whenever at some point during the life of a project, or even after a project is done, at some point Final Cut's going to update itself, or I will update Final Cut because I like to choose when I update my
Right,
apps. But
right.
let's say I update Final Cut and now I reopen up a library and it says, hey, do you want to upgrade this library? And my first reaction is no, I don't want to, or at least not yet, because I kind of want to make sure that I'm ready to upgrade that library. So what I usually do is
Absolutely.
I'll duplicate that library first. And then that way I have the old library that was under the previous version of Final Cut Pro that's now, we know that it worked back then. Duplicate that library and now open it up with the new version of Final Cut, and then let it get updated. And generally everything works fine, but just in case something was to go wrong, I like to have that backup. And because of that, I don't want to be duplicating a 500 gigabyte library
No,
file, right? I want
absolutely.
to only keep that thing
Absolutely.
as small as possible so that I'm only duplicating, potentially, megabytes worth, maybe hundreds of megabytes, but still not that much. Not that much stuff.
So now Final Cut makes a copy for you when you
You're talking
update your project,
you're talking
your
about the
library.
backup files?
Yes.
Yeah. And I do think that that's great. Maybe I'm old school, but I like to make sure that I'm also in a little bit of control of how these things are happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's
Yeah.
one app that I recommend all the time. It's $18. Backups for Final Cut Pro. It's in the App Store. It gives you so much ability to back up what you want, where you want it. You can rename it. You can do it every 5 minutes. Because one of the things about Final Cut Pro's backup is you don't know when it's going to happen. It might be 15 minutes. It might be 20 minutes. Some people say it didn't back up. So I use backups for Final Cut Pro. And I make up my own copies. And I store them where I want. I can rename them. It's $18. The guy's been developing it for years. He's really, really good. So when we first started communicating again, it was on Twitter. And I had this tweet up that you commented on.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So this is Final Cut Pro 10.5.2. This is the icon. And then the 10.5.3, they changed it to the angle scissors, and then they changed it in 10.5.4. 3 weeks later, from 10.5.3 to 10.5.4, 3 weeks later, they changed it to this icon, right? And then you said, let me see where I can find that. Then you said this. Oh, wow, I didn't know about the 10.5.4 blade cursor change. Thanks for being such an awesome source of Final Cut Pro news. Now, I wasn't sure if you were being funny or you were being serious there. That's why I said, Wes, LOL. I try to keep on top of Final Cut Pro related things, even though they are not that important to me. And the icons, of course, are not that important to me because I use the playhead and I use the keyboard shortcut. I never used the blade icon. But other people were very concerned about the change, so I just documented it so people knew that they changed it they had 3 different icons in 3 weeks, which is
That's right, yeah.
wow. The icon people are busy, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I did not know about the most recent one.
Okay.
10.5.3 was worked on. Well, I guess what became 10.5.3 was worked on while I was still at Apple. But 10.5.3 shipped after I had left.
Okay.
So I was aware that the angled scissors change was coming, but then I did not know that the orientation of the scissors
They
change
switched
was
to
coming.
vertical.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that I do use Logic a lot, and Logic has scissors. They've always had, so never had a blade, but the keyboard shortcut, I made it a B. I'm not sure if it's B natively or not because I modify my keyboard shortcuts for both Final Cut and
why
Logic.
not? Make them work for you.
Yeah, well, here's what I do. The top 10, the things that I do most, I have single keys. Okay? whatever I do over and over again. So I use zoom in and zoom out single keys, of course, J, K, and L. And then I have deselect, because that's what I do a lot. And then I have, in Logic, you have multiple ways to delete. You can just do regular delete, leaves a gap. You can do a shuffle left or a shuffle right when you delete something. It'll go either way on the timeline. And then you also have the ability to, there's one more that I use that just, it's like a ripple delete.
Oh,
okay. So when I'm working in Logic and I have this audio files and I'm selecting clips and I'm deleting, I have the option, without changing tools, I have the option of leaving a gap or closing the gap, depending on what keyboard shortcut I use. And I really like that when I'm doing audio. So one of these times, years and years and years ago, I don't think it was on Final Cut Pro Radio. It might have been, but you were on one of the Google Hangouts or something, and I told you I'd give you $100 if you would do a scrolling timeline plugin. I'm still waiting. I'm hoping that you're still going to do that. $100 cash. I'll get my wallet out.
Yeah, well, I think Chris Hawking and Command Post,
Yep.
as far as an attempt from a third party to solve that problem,
Yep.
has tried that. And yeah, I know that that's something that people request a lot. I don't know why it's technically challenging, but I think I had heard a comment from you on a recent episode that you had hoped that with a faster processor,
Right,
that you might be able to have the scrolling timeline or something
right.
like that. And unfortunately, some of those sorts of things aren't. There might be a performance reason as to why they didn't engineer it that way, but
Right.
getting rid of the performance problem by getting a faster computer doesn't make the thing suddenly possible. They
Right.
still need to, enable the feature or build the feature or do something like that to take advantage of the better performance that may be possible with new systems.
No, I understand. But I figured I spent $10,500 on this Mac Pro. I was hoping with that much iron behind my timeline, I could get No, I understand what's going on. But from what I understand, from what I've heard, is it has to do with the redrawing of the waveforms and scrolling at the same time. That's probably
part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be one of the issues. Because listen, when I do, I'll take the audio from this live stream and I'll make it into a podcast. So I'll have an hour and a half of audio, and I can't scroll that by hand. An hour. So I take it in Logic, and of course, in Logic, you can have two scrolling timelines. You have
nice.
one on top with one zoom level, and then you have the audio editor underneath at a zoomed in level, so you can see specifically they both will zoom. So that makes it really, really, really cool to do audio work. So I'm looking forward to getting a 16-inch M1X or M2, whatever they're going to release, MacBook Pro. And I hope it's coming out in 2021. Who the heck knows? You would think that Apple would want to have new MacBooks before Christmas buying season, because the last ones were out last November.
Yeah, right.
It makes sense that they would, get that going to have it out sometime, between now and the fall, September, October. In 2016, which was the first Final Cut Pro Summit that I went to, they had an Apple event the day before the summit. I think it was a Wednesday. And at that Apple event, they introduced the new version of Final Cut Pro, which was 10.3, with the new MacBook Pro then, 2016. So I'm hoping maybe history is going to repeat itself. They're going to come up with a new M1X, M2 MacBook Pro this fall, and, Final Cut Pro 10.6, whatever the heck they're working on. But at least the Icon team is working. We know that they are working. We have, right? Don't we? We have definitive proof that they are working. So they are working overtime, right?
Well, I certainly hope that you're right about the new systems. I mean, I know nothing about that, and even when I was working at Apple, I knew nothing about that. I mean, I think people sometimes know more about what Apple's working on if they don't work at Apple. When you're in Apple, accuracy is just as strong, but you have the additional layer of you're not even allowed to try to find out the answers to these things, or at least if you're outside, you can sort of read the tea leaves and figure things out.
Yes.
But I do think that historically, like you pointed out in that 2016 event, which I remember being there for that, because I remember they had done their whole presentation with from an iMac, and at the end of the presentation, I think they might have said something like, "Oh, by the way, if you look over at that iMac, you might notice that it's like slightly darker gray than you might have
Right.
expected." And then they revealed that there was this whole new machine that they hadn't yet announced yet. So they, historically, enjoyed using Final Cut sort of as a platform to show off the new hardware, because obviously it's taking advantage of the capabilities of
Right.
the new CPUs and GPUs and all that stuff. It's a great way to highlight the power of the machines. So I would love it if history repeated itself, and they found some great ways to highlight new hardware using Final Cut again.
Well, yeah. I mean, we know that the new MacBook Pro is coming. That's not a secret. 14 and 16, as everybody knows, it's coming, and we know this new version of Final Cut Pro coming. I mean, it's not going to stop at 10.5.4. It's not going to stop development there after they change the icons 3 times. Come on. So we know both of those things are going to be happening, and I'm just saying that they're not going to have the same MacBooks they had last Christmas for this Christmas. That just makes sense. They're not going to do that. But they have, typically September is the iPhone event. That's the big event, because the iPhone is just through the roof as far as financials and selling units. I mean, I buy one every year. I love my iPhone 12 Pro Max. Absolutely. It's a great phone, and I can't wait to see what they do with the 13. And then a lot of times they'll have another event in October, and sometimes even have another one in November. So you are not working for anybody right now? Are you working to do your own plugins? Are you back to doing that or something? Or
Right now, I'm mostly not working.
okay,
So previously, before going to Apple, and I'd spent a lot of time at a company called Automatic Duck that I started
right,
with my
automatic
dad.
duck. Yep.
And Automatic Duck still exists, and my dad Harry and I have, since I left Apple, have talked a few times about, is there a product or two that we could, do to make somebody's life a little bit easier.
Right.
Um, my dad developed some software for me that was helpful for me in making my videos to, when you watch some of my videos, sometimes there's on screen, I'll show a map of where I ran with some details of like how many
Right.
miles, how many hours, and
Right.
that sort of thing. And that is a custom title that I have done in Motion and rigged it in such a way where in Final Cut I can put the little dot, like the completion dot, wherever I want it to be on this map. But the trick was getting the GPS data from my watch onto that title.
Oh,
So
okay.
my
Okay.
dad made some software for me that would take the GPX data and draw the route map in Motion, and then allow me to uh, do whatever I need to do, inside of Final Cut Pro to rig it up. But so he and I have talked about maybe doing something like that together, because I think he and I really miss working together. I think one of the sadnesses of going to work for a large company like Apple is that you're no longer allowed to develop anything on your own on the side. And since working with my dad was always a big joy of mine, I missed that a lot. So he and I have talked about doing some of that stuff this summer. Life has just had a real way of getting in the way this summer. I mean, not in bad ways, but he and I have been incredibly busy. So some of the efforts towards the projects we had talked about have been slow, but I
Right.
just
Right.
emailed him this morning that I have 900 gigabytes of media for a project that he and I were talking about. So
Wow.
I need to get him a drive so that he can make some forward progress on that. But besides that, my my intention after leaving Apple in April was to take the summer off and just have a break between that chapter and whatever the next chapter is going to be.
Okay.
Um, and I have a lot of races planned for the summer, and so yeah, I'm taking time off to run, to make videos of my races, and um, put some more stuff, more content on my YouTube channel. And I've been having some conversations with companies about, is there a place for me there, or how can we work together? So I expect that, come late summer, early fall, that I may have landed someplace and working on something cool to help professional editors' lives get better. And I certainly love the industry that I've been working in for the last, well, I guess 20 years now since I started Automatic Duck. And
Right.
I started out as an editor, and I love editing, but I also love being able to make tools that editors need to get their job done. So I don't think I'll be
Yes.
going far. I'm not switching to some other new industry. I think I'll be, still improving the lives of editors, hopefully Final Cut Pro editors, in a meaningful way.
Yeah. No, don't go over to Microsoft, for example. We would not like that. We would be in uproar. So
Very good.
Xsend Motion is still, I saw that it was still on the FX Factory app, right?
Yeah, that's right. So Automatic Duck has a few products. That Xsend Motion was our attempt to help users who wanted the round tripping problem of Final Cut Pro and Motion solved. So, people remember, old people remember, in the days of Final Cut Pro 7 and Motion 4, the Final Cut Pro Studio days, there was a great workflow where you could select a clip in Final Cut and send it to Motion and then do whatever it is you want to do to that clip in Motion. And then that essentially saved the Motion project file that Final Cut was able to read back directly. And that workflow was really nice. You would right click on the clip, say send to Motion. It would create the MOTN file. Final Cut 7 replaced the clip in the timeline with that new Motion project file. And then after you saved your work in Motion, switch back to Final Cut, and it's just automatically replaced. And you can go back into Motion, make an update, come back into Final Cut, and the updates would update. It was a great workflow. And with
It
Final Cut
was.
10,
It was.
yeah, I used to use it all the time, and it was. I mean, I think this was a little bit before the dynamic link with Premiere and After Effects, which is also quite useful. So I think anything you can do when you have, companion apps, help those apps work together, I think is a laudable goal. So with Final Cut 10 and Motion 5, that workflow was not replicated. So back in, I think, 2014, I think Harry and I started working on what we thought would be a solution to that problem. And so we created an app that would take XML from Final Cut Pro and create that as a Motion project file. So you could essentially take either a project or a compound clip inside of Final Cut, say, send that over to Motion, that our app would then create the Motion project file. And then you could do what the things you need to do in Motion. And then, unfortunately, you can't just save that MOTN file and import it back into Final Cut as regular media. You have to publish it as a generator or as a title or
Right.
something like that. So that part of the workflow is still wonky because I don't think a lot of people think that way in terms of I have some media in Motion, but doesn't appear in my event library. It appears in my generators library. So anyway, there's some strangeness there that we as a third party weren't able to improve that. But in terms of getting the things into Motion, that was solved. And then you could then take it back into Final Cut as, like I said, as a generator or something like that. So that was one of the tools that we made for Final Cut users. And then another thing that we made that actually I've been hearing other people talk about recently is we made a plugin for After Effects that would also read Final Cut 10 XML. And that product is called Ximport AE. So it's a After Effects plugin that lives in the import submenu of the file menu in After Effects. And you can use that product to import an XML file from Final Cut Pro 10, and that rebuilds your work as a composition inside of After Effects. But what other people have been using it recently, I've learned, with LumaFusion, because LumaFusion on the iPad allows you to export an XML intended. The original intention, of course, is to start your work on the iPad and then go to Final Cut Pro
Right.
with the
Right.
XML workflow. But apparently there are some people who they don't need to go to Final Cut. They need to go to After Effects for some compositing work. So that same product can be used to bridge between LumaFusion and After Effects, which I think is pretty cool.
What do you think about the possibility of Final Cut coming to the iPad? Is that something that you'd be interested in using? Final Cut on an iPad?
I have sort of mixed feelings about the iPad. I think in some ways, I mean, it's very cool what the iPad can do, but I'm an old school Final Cut user. I'm so good and so fast in Final Cut that I want my keyboard and I want my screen
Right.
space. I want
Right.
I want the 32-inch whatever screen, and But what I do see a huge value in being able to preview media ahead of time. Certainly, I've had many occasions where I've been on a trip and I've shot a bunch of stuff with my GoPro, and now I'm traveling home. Maybe I'm on an airplane, and I just wish so badly that I could just look at my iPad and just view the footage that I've just recently shot. And I feel like there's a really interesting possibility of doing some, favoriting on an iPad, and maybe those
Right.
favorites could get exported into Final Cut. I think that'd be pretty cool. Um, I'm in a world where I have both an iPad and a desktop computer and a laptop computer. So in my particular world, I don't need to edit just on an iPad because I have all
Right.
this other gear that's geared towards professional fast editing. So I would like to use the iPad for what it's good for, some quick touch interactions, traveling while I'm on the airplane, or sitting down somewhere for some time on the couch really comfortably. And then
Right. Of course.
once I'm done with that, I would like a world in which I could take those favorites or keywords or reject ranges, whatever I've done, apply them to my desktop system, and now sit down and I really feel like I'm working and really get down to work.
Right. I've had Chris and Terry from LumaFusion on maybe 4 or 5 times on the show. And one of the things the last time, Apple's spring event, they showed LumaFusion 6 times.
It's amazing, right?
6 times. And to me, they wouldn't be doing that if Final Cut Pro was coming to the iPad in the near future. I mean, I'm not saying ever, but why would they feature software 6 separate times in an Apple event? That's got to be a record. But they showed them 6 separate times because when they were on the show, I did a supercuts for them. I said, here's my version of the Apple event, and I just put all the clips together so one played after the other. But so Apple is constantly highlighting LumaFusion for video for the iPad. So I don't think I didn't expect it at WWDC. Some people did. I said, why would they do that? Why would they show LumaFusion and then bring it out, the same within a month? But they didn't. But I'm not saying they'll never get there, because it's not just, people think, oh, the new Mac Pro has the M1 chip. It doesn't have the OS. It doesn't have Mac OS, and Mac OS and iOS are 2 different OSs. They're not the same. So until they get Mac OS running on an iPad, or get a version, which I think if they get it on the iPad, it'll be a lighter version. I have 1,000 plugins on my desk, for Final Cut. What are you going to do with those? Everybody's got to port them over, Speaking of that, our friend Roger from CoreMelt did the first plugin for LumaFusion on the iPad. It's a stabilizing plugin, the very first one.
Yeah, I heard that on your show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting what Chris said, how I think Chris said it right after you were talking about that with him, that there isn't a mechanism for just for plugins on iOS. So they have to sort of build the CoreMelt stuff into LumaFusion as something that's a part of the app. It's not a third-party plugin that you can purchase separately and install yourself. So I think that's an interesting situation that he described, where the third-party universe currently, it sounds like, doesn't have the ability to create separate apps or separate plugins. So I think that'll be interesting if there was to be any other editing platforms on the iPad. Could iOS allow for plugins for third parties to do it? I don't know if Xplug if it's possible to have that to run on iOS. I don't know.
Right.
But there's certainly a lot of interesting questions there about what would third parties be able to do in such a lockdown environment.
No, exactly. So that's one of the reasons I'm thinking Final Cut's not coming to the iPad now, because people have thousands of dollars invested in plugins that they need, that I depend on in Final Cut Pro. I mean, I can't get along without them. Just the titles and things. I'm a sucker for, lower thirds in titles. And I don't mean swirly ones. I mean just good quality, graphically interesting titles. I'll buy them all the time. I get them from all kinds of places, including FX Factory. I get them from Ripple Training. They have some great ones, of course, our friends Steve and Mark over there. And so what am I going to do if I'm on the iPad? Now,
and what are you going to do with your fonts? If you download a font on your Mac, how's that going to work on your iPad?
Well, I never thought about that. You're right, because some of these plugins download fonts, as they're installing, I've noticed. I said, hey, what's that font doing there? And I said, oh, it's being part of this plugin they needed to do their whatever the heck they're doing. So so the Creative Summit, so NAB, are you planning on going to NAB this year? It's in person, and they've scheduled it in person this year, second week of October, I think. Are you planning on going there?
Yeah, my current plan is to go. My
Okay.
current plan is to, yeah, see what's happening in life at that point. But I have a hotel reserved. You know, the nice thing about the NAB hotels is that you can cancel for free. So I figured it was
Yes.
better to at least book it now.
Right.
So I have a hotel. I am planning to go. I have never missed an NAB since, I think I've been going every year since 1997, I
Oh,
think, something
wow.
like that.
Okay.
So there's
Okay.
when you register for NAB, you're giving it your name, your company name, and your address. There's always, last few years has been a little pop-up menu that's like, how many years have you been going to NAB? And I'm now in like that category of like 21 plus or something. And
Wow.
I mean, talk about a way to make you feel old. I mean, when you there's all these young whippersnappers. Of course, I just said whippersnappers, so now I am old. But yeah, I've been going for a long time, and I love going to see my friends in the industry and just seeing my friends. So I can't bear the idea of not going to NAB. So yeah, I plan to be there, and of course by October, who knows? Maybe I'll be at NAB attached to a company, but I do plan to go. I'm hoping that coronavirus and all the problems we've had don't get so much worse that we have to rethink that. So current
Yeah.
thoughts
No.
is to be
Yeah.
there and be in that
I
place.
agree. The Maryland ended their state of emergency July the 1st. But Maryland's one of the best states as far as they're, getting the
Oh, good.
75% of the population has got inoculated and all that stuff. So, yeah, hopefully, yeah. I don't, it seems like it's working, like the shots are working. So, going forward, everybody seems to be relaxing up towards that. So that'll be good. I'm the same way. I think I'm planning on going unless, something changes, but I don't really think it will. I think it's going to be fine. I think we're going to be, further along at that point. So this is, let me pull your webpage up here. Is this the plugin you were talking about that your dad made?
No, no, but I'll talk. Let's talk. I would like to talk to you about this for a minute. This is
Okay.
actually an animation that I created using Google Earth Studio,
Okay.
and so Google Earth Studio is something that runs inside of Chrome. So it's a browser app, and it's using the same Google Earth engine that Google Earth Pro on the desktop uses, but it has a really interesting interface that is designed for making animations. And all the places where you see text in this animation, inside of Google Earth Studio, I had placed little markers, like little geotags, essentially, on the map to say, here's a spot that I want to note. Here's the town of Flagstaff, or here's the town of Ona. And then also the blue line that you saw in there, that was that was also the GPS data from my watch. But the actual animation was done inside of Google Earth Studio, and then I exported a file out of Google Earth Studio that I imported into After Effects, and then those markers appear in After Effects as null objects, and
Hmm.
then it creates this whole 3D world with a 3D camera, and the text in these 3D null objects and their placeholder text are in 3D space. So the animation has as a background the video output of Google Earth Studio, which is a rendered what you see there, just the
Right.
rendered view of the world. But then on top of that, in After Effects' 3D space is text objects, which you can edit. And so I change the text of the towns and make sure that they're the font that I want. And so I'm able to composite the text that's basically tracked on top of the text animate or the background animation from Google Earth Studio, and come up with some results like that, which it's very complicated to make it. And the animation tools are a little bit tricky. Sometimes to get the camera to move smoothly takes me,
Right.
many, many tries to get the keyframing
Okay.
exactly right. So it's quite complicated to do, but I find it worth it because in some of the cases of these races that I do, the scope of the race is so enormous that it's hard to wrap your brain around what is it you're traveling through, or how far are you actually traveling. So some of those animations help me to give you the viewer a sense of, what is the scale. Um, Another place is in other places of the video, while you see either me running or you see what my camera, like my point of view, there on the something's on the left hand side of the screen. You might see a similar, just a map that's overlaid as a title, and that's like, yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing here. So this is a title where the date, all the textual stuff, those were just the way that I rigged this particular title. Those are just text fields that every time I wanted to put this information on screen, I had to type that in.
Oh, okay.
But the way that I rigged the map part of the title is that I had the shape that was generated as a motion shape using the GPS data from the watch. And then I did a couple of things to make a red version of it, to make a white version of it, so that I could show you which has been traveled and what yet hasn't been traveled. And then I made this little orange dot that shows like the current location. And it's all rigged in such a way where there's a slider in Final Cut so that I can move that slider. I can type in, for example, 16.1 miles, and it moves the slider to 16.1 on that map.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's really quite powerful. That's one of the things that I love so much about rigging of stuff with motion and in Final Cut is you can do a bunch of work in motion ahead of time to make it so that when you're in Final Cut, you don't have to go back to motion to tweak things. You could just do all the tweaking in Final Cut.
Yeah, yeah.
It requires a lot of forethought and sometimes a lot of planning and trial and error to get the title to work exactly as you want it to work. But then once you got it built, then in Final Cut you can do all the work and you're not constantly hopping back into motion to remake titles.
When you were coming on and we talked about this last week, I went back and re-listened to the original podcast, and one of the things I had forgotten, but I was surprised, is Motion doesn't have any XML export. It has no XML. You can't export an XML file from Motion.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the reason why is similar is I feel like there's been a lot of times in my history of somebody who built tools that translated from one place to another.
Right.
Going from A to B often made a lot of sense. And people sometimes would say, well, how can I go from B back to A? And very often going the other direction through something like XML just doesn't make sense in terms of the way these tools are architected. So you go to Motion oftentimes to do a composite. You want Motion to do the work of baking things together and layering them and rendering them down.
Right.
To get those individual objects back into Final Cut as editable items kind of defeats in some ways the purpose of going to that compositing tool to begin with. So I can understand both the desire to get an XML out of Motion, but I also understand sometimes it just doesn't make sense. That what makes more sense is to get the finished piece from Motion back into Final Cut, either as rendered output or as a generator with some rigged properties that you can make tweaks, or change it.
So we got a comment from Edgar Davis. Wes, idea for a new app or utility, batch sync utility that makes, let's put that back up there, that takes Final Cut Pro Multicam and splits it into individual clips with shot metadata carrying over.
Final Cut Multicam and split. Okay, well, always good to hear ideas for what to do. Of course, Edgar, the real question is, how much would you pay?
Exactly.
And how many of you are there who are willing to pay that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
that's one thing about the App Store. App Store pricing has become so ridiculous that unless you're selling loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of a piece of software, you just can't make money when the individual prices are fairly small in a niche market. There's that's part of the challenge of being a third party these days.
No, absolutely. But I don't mind paying for, I buy I buy 80% of the Final Cut Pro plugins that are available because I just keep buying them. I support the developers. So if you do go to NAB, I think you should bring this swag, make this the hat, bring the hat and whatever your branding is going to be. I have one of those hats, but I use it for mowing when I mow grass. I have a zero turn. As a matter of fact, Here's my backyard. So I have a zero turn that just, I have an acre and a half, and it just zips around this acre and a half. But I have one of those hats to keep all the dust and stuff from getting in my hair.
Smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love having hats like that. I mean, they kind of look silly in a way, I think, but when you're running through the desert, it's really important to keep the sun off of you. So
Oh,
I'm
I
happy
can't
to look
imagine.
ridiculous in a hat with a cape on the back. But
Well, one of the
yeah,
things you just said was it makes you talking about whippersnappers. It makes you,
yeah,
how many of those whippersnappers can run 256 miles in 4 days?
yeah. That's a good. That's actually a great point. I didn't run my first ultra marathon, and by the way, an ultra marathon is any race longer than a marathon. So my first 50-kilometer race, or 31 miles, I was 42 years old when I ran that race. So yeah, I may not be very young anymore, but at the same time, I've kind of fallen into a sport that seems to work pretty well for, more aged runners, or maybe not aged, but I'm definitely not a kid, and I'm not as fast as younger runners, but I can certainly get out there and run for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and can just keep plugging along. And so yeah, age is helping me, or not, or certainly not hindering me in my current
Right,
athletic pursuits.
right. Now listen, I run 2 miles a day. It's okay.
That's good. Yeah, great.
That's what I do. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I make coffee, feed the cats, check on websites for different things, and then I'll go out and do a run. 2 miles. That's my knees are good. My back is good. I enjoy it. I enjoy the 2 miles. It's very pleasant at this time. I live in the country, or it's somewhat country, and it's very, very pleasant, especially like in the fall and the spring. So we
Yeah,
have
well,
a
I think it's
couple.
important to be active, and it's important to
Oh,
be moving.
absolutely.
And you don't have to be moving many, many miles. I mean, just moving some, but also you said that you enjoy it, and that's also another key thing.
Exactly.
You have to
I
you
enjoy
have to
it.
have fun doing it. Yeah.
256 miles, and I would enjoy that. I mean, 2 miles, that's fine. That's what I do. I have some other things that I do too. I do a little bit of other exercises, and then I'd have to take care of my property as well. I have a whole barn full of not farm equipment, just small. I have 2 tractors and
Oh,
snow
cool.
blowers and weed whackers and tillers and in the whole 9 yards. So that keeps me busy for the summer, just keeping track of my girlfriend's garden. She has the garden, and then I do the lawn mowing. And then in the fall is the worst because the leaves. I used to have 30 100-foot oak trees. I've cut a few down, so I probably got 25, 26. But 100-foot, over 100-year-old oak trees produce a lot of oak leaves. So in the
Oh my
fall,
gosh.
it's I took one time. Now I do them myself, but I've hired a company for a couple years to do it. They took 2.5 tons of leaves off this property in 2.5 tons. Their truck
That's
is
unbelievable.
a 1 ton truck, and they took 2.5 loads. They didn't come back the following year. That's one of the things I've had to do is take care of myself. And unfortunately, it's also the time that the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit happens. It used to be October, and then they changed it to November. Now, Michael Yanovich, do you know Michael?
I do, yeah.
He was on one of the last TV lives, and he said he wouldn't go to the Creative Summit if it's in October because he celebrates Halloween all month long. And I said, "You mean with your kids?" He goes, "No, that's different. That's different. I celebrate it, and I won't go if it's in October." So that's why he was there last year, in 2019 when we had the in-person one, because we were sitting next to each other during the Apple presentation. That's what I brought it
Oh,
up.
okay. Right, right.
Yeah. So do you think you'll be going to the Creative Summit this year if that happens in person? Because the reason I think it's going to happen is because Future Media Concepts, who does the Creative Summit, is doing in person 108 classes at NAB. 108 in-person classes at NAB the month before. So I'm going to presume they're going to have another in-person Creative Summit because I really missed that last year. The virtual one
I
was
sure
really
hope so.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the virtual one was a challenge for me. I mean, I was working during that, and I was unable to get away to go to some of the sessions. But the nice thing about the in-person one was I was able to go to the sessions. You know, it's one thing to actually like leave work and go to sessions, but there was another thing when the sessions are virtual and I got work to do. It's like I didn't feel like I had as much of the ability to ignore work for a little while and look at a browser screen. So, when it's in person, you know, it's a lot easier to do that. So I'm hoping that it is in person, and I'm hoping to go, just to also just see the community and also see my friends on the
Yes,
team. So
absolutely.
I'm crossing fingers that it happens again. We'll
It's
see.
my favorite Final Cut Pro event. Well, it's the only event that's dedicated to Final Cut Pro. You know,
That's
NAB
right.
is
Yeah,
not dedicated to Final Cut Pro. As a matter of fact, some years there's hardly any Final Cut Pro there. But
that's
the
right.
reason I go to NAB is Final Cut Pro stuff. If there's going to be Final Cut Pro events, they used to have the Super Meet. Well, that's partially Final Cut Pro, but they used to have the dinner after Apple presented. They have a dinner, the Monday night and stuff. And then some of the booths, like in 2019, Frame.io had a lot of concentrated Final Cut Pro things happening at their booth. Michael Cioni was there. Of course, he's a big, big proponent of Final Cut. So that'll be one of the determining factors whether I go to NAB this year, is if there's going to be something from Final Cut Pro, or some of the vendors are going to be, Final Cut Pro events or sessions or whatever. I mean, like Luma Forge last year in 2019 took over the Super Meet, and they did, the big presentation. And of course, they're big Final Cut Pro people, those people that did that. But this year, OWC bought out Luma Forge. So I don't know what's going to happen. I expect OWC will be at NAB, but I don't know if Luma Forge is going to be there like they have in the last 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. 2017, 2018, 2019. Anyway, those 3 times.
Yeah, right.
That's the motivation for me to go from the East Coast to the West Coast. Otherwise, I'm not that motivated. I used to be when I was younger, but not anymore. I've been to Europe. I've been to, to England like 6 times. I've been to Paris, but I don't look forward to traveling anymore. Airplanes and stuff. It's just,
Well,
I
it's gonna be
try to
interesting to see how
minimize.
many other people make it to NAB, because that's the other thing too, is that if you and I go but nobody else goes, then was it worth it going? Because if we're just going there to see people and see what's new, and nobody's there showing anything that's new, or there aren't any friends there to see, I think that's part of the thing. Is my goal is to be there. I'm hoping that others are going to be there as well.
No, I agree. And initially, because I'm following the news about NAB, initially they said Blackmagic's going to be there, Sony's going to be there, Panasonic's going to be there. A lot of these big, like, Blackmagic takes a couple acres of space over there.
That's right.
They took over the
Yeah,
old
it's huge.
Apple space, so they're just like gigantic. So if they're not going to be there, that's, but according to what I read initially, they are going to be there. Panasonic has already pre-announced their GH6. I have a GH4 and I have a GH5, and they've already pre-announced the GH6 for 2021. So that's probably what they're going to be showing at NAB as well.
Hmm.
I'll be curious. I don't need a camera. My GH5 is fine, and my iPhone 12 Pro Max is more than I need right now. But I'm still curious at the GH6, what they're going to do with that, with the Micro Four Thirds platform. If I was going to buy a camera now, I would probably get the Sony A7S III because of the low light capability. That seems to be the killer one. But
Yeah,
I'm not
everyone
buying
loves
one
that
now.
camera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever shot with one?
No, I was also invested a bit in the GH family, so I didn't have any Sony stuff. I love the GH4. That was a great camera.
Right.
And I had a GX7, which was like a smaller pocket kind of camera that still had removable lenses, and so I would sometimes interchange my lenses between the GX7 and the GH4 and use the two together. But yeah, I think that's a great form factor for sure.
Oh, I do too. It's my favorite. As a matter of fact, I have a GH4 for my camera, web camera.
Ah, nice. Okay.
GH4 with the Sigma 1835 lens on it. It just sits back there ready to go in a moment's notice. So the week that 10.5.4 came out, that Tuesday, I went on Twitter and I said, is today Tuesday? Because typically Final Cut Pro updates were on Tuesdays. So I went on Twitter in the morning. I says, today Tuesday? Just have a feeling. Well, Tuesday wasn't Tuesday. Thursday was Tuesday. They had to wait till Thursday, and it came out that week, That's one of the reasons that I like being able to talk about things and guessing at things and, no restrictions. Not being on like the beta team, for example. So
Yeah.
that for me, that works for my situation. Well, I have a radio show. If I couldn't talk about Final Cut Pro, I wouldn't have a podcast. If I can't, I can't talk about it.
It's better for you to know nothing. It's better that you don't get any inside information, because if you did, then you wouldn't really be able to say any of that you got. So it's better
Exactly.
that you are told nothing and are permitted to just speculate to your heart's content.
And have fun.
That's right.
So one of the things that happens here is, you know who this phone call's from?
Can't wait to find out.
Hello? Yeah. Wes is here.
Oh, great.
You want me to give him a message? He can talk about anything he wants to as Final Cut Pro wise. Whatever he wants to talk about, he can talk about. There's no restrictions from Apple. That's fantastic. I will give him the message. You want to talk to him? No, just give him the message. Fantastic. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the call. That was somebody named Tim. I don't know what is.
Absolving me of any legal obligations to not share anything that I possibly might know.
You can say anything you want. No restrictions whatsoever. Did you ever meet Steve Jobs when you're working with Apple over the years?
Never did. No.
Never did?
No, I never met anybody at that level in the company. I think even when I was at Apple, did I meet anybody? I mean, I met my boss's boss, a director.
Sure.
I think I met a vice president who was above the director. But that was there's so many levels of vice presidents and whatever. I didn't meet that many, high up, important decision making type folks when I was there. And before my time at Apple, no, I never met Steve Jobs or had the opportunity to.
Okay. Now, what's going on with motion? I mean, people, because, Final Cut has really advanced from 10.0 to 10.5.4. I mean, dramatic improvements. Motion, not so much. But people love motion. They really, really like it. So it seems to be small increases, and they seem to be things that maybe Final Cut needs. It'll make an improvement that Final Cut could use, titles or whatever. But the motion itself, I mean, I use it a little bit. I use Logic a lot more because my background is audio. But is motion, it seems not to be as advanced as far as improvements as Final Cut. It seems to be much lower attention's paid to it. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they're going to change that at any point. I mean, the Resolve has everything built into one app, DaVinci Resolve. Not built in, but I mean, you can access everything with a different panel. You have Fairlight, and you have DaVinci the color, you have DaVinci the editor. Speaking of that, one of the weird things on the Apple website, it says great companion apps for Final Cut Pro, and they had DaVinci Resolve in there. This is an Apple.
But it's true. It is true. You do your editing in Final Cut Pro, but if you want to get into some, super detailed color correction that you can't do in Final Cut, then DaVinci Resolve is a great place to do that.
Yeah, I understand, because DaVinci Resolve is used on films and everything else, but it didn't say the coloring aspect. It just said DaVinci Resolve, and it's like saying, "Hey, Premiere is a good," It was a little bit because they had Logic, and it had tutorials on the App Store, and it had compressor, and it had motion, and then it had DaVinci Resolve. Really, I got a kick out of that.
Well, I've always had this feeling that all the apps are really in the same toolbox. And I know that we live in a world where people have camps. There's pro Apple camp, or a pro Adobe camp, or a pro DaVinci camp. And sometimes people in those camps don't want to talk about the other tools, or don't want to touch the other tools. I've always tried to have as many of the tools as I possibly can and try to use as many of them as I possibly can. To me, having all the tools means that they're all companion apps towards towards Final Cut, or actually, they're all companion
Sure.
apps to me. I'm the one doing the creativity. They're all tools for me to express myself and try to get done what I need to do.
No,
So the
absolutely.
only problem with having all the tools is it's a lot to learn, a lot of stuff to keep track of, and of course it does add up to in cost in a while. But um, things in general are so cheap today compared to how they used to be that I'm
Yeah.
happy to pay for my software because it's something that I enjoy. People spend a lot of money on their hobbies, and I spend a lot of money on my running hobby. I spend a lot of money on my video making hobby. But of course, all these things are also they affect my profession too because I like making tools for editors, and the only way that I can know what pain is the editor is feeling is to feel the pain myself and to
Sure.
be a user. So
Sure.
to me, it's all worth it. I think too, especially in for me in my position where I'm, thinking about tools for other users, I personally try to keep using lots of other different tools just to sort of see how problems are being solved. I don't necessarily want to steal ideas or copy how something is done, but rather just to to understand how how various problems are solved in different ways. Just it all feeds into the brain. I've been using Eventbrite recently to organize an event. That's not something I ever need to do in my professional life, but it's been interesting to use the Eventbrite website, get in there and learn how to sell tickets and modify my attendees. And I just kind of think it's really interesting to get out there and learn as much as I can, be a jack of all trades in a way. And because I think it all feeds in and it all helps inspire to come up with interesting solutions in the future. Who knows how my Eventbrite experience is going to, you know, solve a real problem for making an editing thing, but maybe it will. Who knows?
Right. So, do you have anything, without telling me what it is, anything in your thinking about doing a plugin that can cause less pain for editors right now? Anything that you're thinking about for the next few months?
The things that I think the things that we're currently thinking about are not mature enough to even
Okay.
tease. So no,
Okay.
I'm not in a place where I can do that.
No, I was just wondering if you had some though. Had some ideas.
We have a couple of ideas, and that that's what Harry and I have been toying around with, and I think we have. The question is, do we have time to do the thing? Is there a market for the thing we want to do?
Right.
Um, and so we're trying to figure it all out. I think if we could make if we could make a thing that makes at least a part of the user experience, the editor's journey, a little bit easier or help them past a hurdle. They would still have work to do afterwards, but I think there might be something we can do to at least reduce one of the speed bumps along the way. I mean, there's so much about editing that's difficult. Shooting is difficult, logging is difficult, favoriting is difficult, assembling is difficult, trimming is difficult, mixing is difficult, everything is difficult. And I think that one of the things that I personally find challenging is that I'll I'll make my assembly and I'll get a quick rough cut done, and I'll maybe take a day or two, and I feel like, man, I can watch this thing through. It's great. I even have the music in there, but it's all the final trimming and the splitting the audio out, doing all the fades, doing the audio mix, all of this like fiddly work, that last 10 or 20% of the project, it takes 90% of the time. And
Right.
I'm always amazed at how much time it takes to do all the fiddly work. And I think some of the fiddly work is possible for third parties to participate in solving. I think some of the fiddly work needs to be fixed or addressed in the NLE itself. And then there's other hurdles that are even earlier in before you get to the fiddly work. So yeah, what we're interested in is we've identified, at least in our mind and in the workflow that we've been experiencing over and over lately, a couple speed bumps. And it's like, hey, if we could at least get that speed bump solved or lessened, maybe the entire experience would get faster or better. So that's kind of where my brain is, in this particular area as we're thinking about it. What can we do to speed things along and reduce those speed bumps?
What about, you ever thought about working with Resolve?
Make as a third party?
Yeah, it's plug in for something that they don't have right now. You ever thought about them? Because they're pretty, they're every time they turn around, they have a new version, and it's just all these things that are happening, and it's just amazing, the amazing amount of development that they do. They constantly innovation and stuff. But
Yeah,
so, well, one of the things is people request. There's two requests that people all the time: be raw in Final Cut. Hasn't happened yet. So I'm not sure. Some people say it's why would they put it in Final Cut when you have ProRes RAW? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. I mean, Final Cut, Apple and Blackmagic have worked together in the past. They sell the Blackmagic eGPU on the Apple Store. So we know they work together. It's just, I don't shoot B-RAW, so I really don't care. But I hear about it so much from people that I always mention it. That's one of the things. The second thing, the big thing, is collaboration in Final Cut. Better ways for editors to collaborate, especially now with remote, right? With the situation with remote editing and remote stuff. A better way for collaboration in Final Cut. Right now you can hand off libraries and stuff, but it's little bit on the clunky side, the way it works. I mean, everybody compares it to Avid. Yeah, I've heard that before, but Avid's the way that Avid does it still seems a little archaic. You got to poke somebody, hey, open this bin or close that bin or open this and no. And I often said, why don't they have a built-in communication in the Avid system, a little pop-up says, hey, can you open this bin? Hey, can you close this bin? Can you unlock this? Just pops up in the application. But apparently you got to text somebody or you got to call them or you got to go to their room. That's
right.
Build it into the application. Little pop-up, boing, right?
Can't be that hard, right?
Well, you wouldn't think. Yeah. Maybe they don't want to do that. I guess some of the Avid machines are not online in some of the bigger places. What else? What else are we going to talk about? Anything else? Have we covered everything that you want to cover?
Oh, well, I was just excited to talk to you. So we could just by talking, we've certainly satisfied me, because I'm just happy to have an opportunity to be in a room with you.
Oh, absolutely.
Room with you and just have a conversation. I think I'm happy to, I was excited to share with you just briefly the little details of the video, just the production that I do in my things. My videos aren't the most complicated necessarily, although they're more complicated than some. The work that I do on those animations, as I was describing with Google Earth Studio and After Effects, is an enormous amount of work that I think is more challenging than it should be, for mass adoption. But I love being able to do it, and I enjoy being able to share with you how tools like that are employed in a video that documents a race. I was excited to tell you about that motion thing too, because I think that custom titles in motion and being able to rig them is such a cool feature.
Oh, it is.
I wish that
Absolutely.
I wish that the management of the actual files was sometimes better. I mentioned I get annoyed when all these custom motion project files are being published to the movie's motion templates folder, or they can't be stored with regular media. I think that's something that I wish was different, but it's still so cool to be able to exercise that functionality of motion in Final Cut, because I think that what motion is doing has always been really innovative and is so powerful. So it's fun to be able to share with you all this work that I've been doing in Final Cut, because I certainly love the product. I love using it.
Your video it's in 4K, correct?
Yeah, the most recent video for the Cocodona 250 was shot 4K 60.
And
that's what I published it as.
And it's over 12 gigabytes. I checked it out. Yes, it's over 12 gigabytes. So do you use a media asset manager at all with Final Cut of any sort?
I I've played around with Keyflow Pro and um, what's there another one that the name is escaping me right now. I played with some asset management tools in the past, but I don't actively use them. So no.
Okay. The only one that I actively use, and it's not specifically for Final Cut, is Neo Finder. I've been using it since it was called
Yes.
CD Finder because I have Wes. I literally have over there on the left-hand side. I have 50 bare hard drives, and I have 2 RAID 5s underneath my desk, and every one is cataloged with Neo Finder. So whenever I search for something, I open up Neo Finder and I do a search. And if it's in a Final Cut library, it shows me where the library is, on what drive I had to plug in, and it shows me where the media is. So I just plug the drives in and I open up the library. Then I'll put it on I have 2 NVMe SSDs, very, very fast. Well, the Mac Pro has a 2 terabyte NVMe SSD. And then I have one external on Thunderbolt 3 and one more internal on a PCIe slot. So I have 6 terabytes of super fast SSDs. That's what I edit off of. So I'll just take them and transfer them over and edit off of there. But, so I use NeoFinder, catalogs everything. You update it, you plug the drive and you update it, and it'll update quickly. The other thing that I recommend people get Backblaze.
Yeah.
Get Backblaze. The 2 terabyte NVMe SSD that I have connected via Thunderbolt 3. When I was fooling around with Big Sur, because I'm on Catalina, when I was fooling around with Big Sur, I was dual booting from that NVMe SSD, and I've installed Big Sur. Somehow I wiped the whole hard drive.
Oh no.
I was in disk utility and I did something wrong and it just wiped it.
Yeah.
And I said, I guess nothing important's on it. And they said, wait a minute, I have Backblaze. Went back to Backblaze, went back a month, saw everything that I have, and just selected it and downloaded it and put it right back on. So I had the 30-day plan. They'll back up for 30 days. After that, I went to the 1-year plan. It's like a couple bucks extra a month. 1 year, any drive you plug in, they have it, you got to leave it plugged in so it backs up and stuff. But
yeah, I do very similar things. I have NeoFinder because I have a drive that I recently had to pull out. This is archive drive 20 in a plastic case.
There you
and
go.
I basically do the same thing. When I need something, NeoFinder tells me which drive it's on.
Yep.
And I plug it into the tray, get the files off it, put it into a place where I can work on it. Yeah, I think that's a really useful tool. And then I also have why is it that I'm having a mental breakdown on what the device is? But I have a network attached storage QNAP upstairs.
Okay.
And that's I use that just as a sort of a near backup, or I work on things locally on SSDs, and when I'm done, I shove them up there. I also shove them onto the archive disk that it will sort of go into the archive. I have Backblaze also, just in case this entire building burns down.
Right.
At least hopefully something will be on the cloud. Yeah, I think I try to do a similar approach to that. But NeoFinder is kind of as close as I get to any sort of asset management or anything similar as what you said. So.
Yeah, I've been using that since, like I said, since it was CD Finder. So
yeah,
that's
tool.
all. It's a great tool. They update it all the time, and he's a great developer. So I use that as well. So yeah, I was absolutely amazed when I found out about your marathons. To say it's inspiring is just not really. What the heck? Where did you go? You disappeared
Lost
somewhere.
The tab.
What happened? Oh, I don't know what happened. Somehow I clicked off your tab, but yeah. So that is incredible. The amount of racing. There's 200. I can't imagine sleeping 1 hour, 2 hours a day, and for 4 hours straight. The dedication that took. Because I was listening to your the podcast that's coming out, and you injured yourself, and you kept going.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that's what would scare me.
Well, this is the second time. This race was the second time that I ran over 200 miles. The first time I ran the 200-mile distance was in October of 2019, I ran a 240-mile race in Moab. And there's a video of that race also on my YouTube channel. And I actually got injured during that one as well. At around mile 120, I injured my hamstring on my right leg, if I remember right. And it was something that then I had to fight for the next 120 miles. This injury, like the strain or something that I'd done to my hamstring. But while at the same time, because of these races, we're not sprinting, running super fast. There's a bit of a slowness and more of an endurance aspect to it. But I actually was able to get healed up by the end of the race a little bit, and so I was moving a little bit faster towards the end of the race. And what that taught me was that just because you are hurt or hurting doesn't mean that you have to drop out or quit. It's not necessarily a race ending injury that I had suffered. So when in the Cocodona 250 back in May, I was starting to get some blisters and starting to get some pain in my right foot at around mile 190, I think it was. So I'd been going for 190 miles. I was into my fourth day, and my right foot was really hurting. I would stop at the aid stations, and the medics would take a look at the blisters, and I really was struggled through the last 50 miles. There was a lot of pain in that right foot, but I knew that it wasn't life-threatening. I knew that I would be able to heal from it, so I pressed on and finished. But yeah, there's an aspect to these things that's physical. There's another layer on top of that, which is mental, because you just can't do it on physicality alone. Your brain, you have to sort of push through that. But also there comes a time where even your mind struggles with it. So I think at some points in these big endurance events, you have to dig down and find something even deeper to
Yeah.
motivate and
Yeah.
sustain.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Here's
So
another one of your animations. It's incredible.
yeah, I love these animations. They're so useful in sort of helping illustrate the ground we're covering. And I also use, it's interesting too, I also use animations like that before a race. So I'll put what the race often will provide a file of what the course is meant to be, even though people haven't necessarily run it yet. And I will put that into Google Earth and just sort of fly around and just sort of do a little pre-visualization of what it might look like to get it into my head. So my previs skills from editing have come in useful in my running life, because I can get a good sense of understanding what I'm getting myself into before I actually do it.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine. But it's like, look at this. What the heck? That doesn't look like a running path. Looks like mountain climbing.
Yeah, this was coming into mile 212, I think. This was the third. Let's see. No, I guess this is actually the end of the second night. So we're coming into mile 112, and oh yeah, there we go, 113 right there on the title. Oh, and it's interesting. The last thing that you just saw there, this race had a live video component. So the race organizers had volunteers across the course shooting with iPhones. That their video was piped into their studio, which they were running OBS, I believe, to generate a live stream that was on YouTube. And so they had for 4 days basically almost a 24-hour live stream of some race and conversation. So here I was coming into this aid station, and they were able to actually interview me with the hosts in the studio talking to me while I was finishing on top of this mountain. That was a pretty cool aspect. So
you're being a slacker right there, aren't you?
That's right. Slacking, eating some pizza, and now Leah, my crew chief, is using some tools to get some tightness out of my legs. And here I probably slept for about 15 minutes before here I am getting dressed to get back out and start the descent into the next half of the race. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, there was times during the race where I was not having fun.
No, I can imagine there would be a few.
there's a lot of type 2 fun where during it you're like, this is not enjoyable, and then later you look back on it, you're like, no, actually that was pretty good. And there's also a lot of amnesia, sort of selective amnesia that comes into this, where as soon as the race is over, I start to forget all the pain, and all I remember is the good joy. So
Oh,
I've
absolutely.
already signed up to do this race next year. Even though it was an experience that was, challenging as can be, I want to do it again.
Absolutely. All right. I think we've covered everything now. So
Well,
people
it's
can
great to talk to
find.
you. I'm sorry I can't tell you all this. I'm sorry I can't tell you all the secrets,
You
Richard.
can.
I know
We
that
got the phone call.
I,
We got the phone
you
call.
got the
It was
phone call.
it
I
was some
wish I
guy
could
named
tell you.
Tim. Some guy named Tim. I can't say who it was, but some guy named Tim said you're cleared. Not a problem. All the secrets you can reveal. No, it's been great. So people can find your YouTube channel. Just search for Wes Plate. Wes Plate. Just
Yeah, that's what. If you just search for Wes Plate, you'll find it. And that's probably easier than me telling you the URL. But yeah,
right.
find me on YouTube, and then I'm on Instagram. My running handle is Mid Pack Elite, and then also if you just go to westplate.com, that's sort of a clearinghouse where I have all links to past races, information about future races, links to my videos, links to my Instagram. So that's also an easy place to go from.
So who plots out this course? I mean, it's like it's all over the place.
Yeah, well, the company who produced this race is a company in Arizona called Ara Viper Running,
Okay.
and they dreamed this up a little over 2 years ago. They were supposed to run it in 2020, but of course COVID canceled it.
Right.
But there was a runner named Jamil Curry who's from the Phoenix area. He runs Ara Viper Running, and he loves the Arizona area and the region, and wanted a race that would really showcase it. So he and his team dreamt up this route, and in 2019 they ran a version of it to see if it was possible. They ran it over the course of several days, and then once they had the idea that it was generally possible, then they went through and started to talk to landowners and municipalities, and
Oh, of
there's a lot
course.
of permitting involved in trying to make
Okay.
sure that you're allowed to go on all this stuff. And there were parts of the course that we did have to cross private property, so that all had to be arranged and allowed. And um, yeah, there's a lot of work for these race companies in order to put this sort of thing together. And yeah, this particular race was interesting because there were beautiful sections like this, um, that were then interspersed between less interesting and less beautiful sections. Sometimes we had to get between cities, and the only way to do that was to go straight across a cattle ranch. And that 100-degree heat and going across a cattle ranch wasn't beautiful by any means, but it was still an endurance event to accomplish it, to allow us to get to the next beautiful spot. But yeah,
Right. Right.
we got to go through Sedona, which is one of the most beautiful places on earth. And Arizona itself is quite a fascinating state, so I was excited to have this opportunity to explore it.
So the people
So
that are filming you, are they running too? Are they running and filming at the same time?
anytime you see me being filmed, it's either somebody at an aid station, so it's likely to be a crew member,
Okay.
or I had a friend of mine from the Path Projects apparel company who met me on the trail a few times, and he didn't necessarily run with me, but was able to get some video of me running while I was on the course.
Okay.
But most of the running stuff was either I was doing the recording on the trail, or in places like this at an aid station, having the crew record me using their iPhones.
Right.
Yeah, and that's
Fantastic.
another thing. You made the comment earlier about iPhones. It is just amazing the quality the iPhones have today. I easily have a 5 camera shoot, and there's hardly any cameras. It's just people's phones, and I just say, "Hey, everybody, shoot with your phones, and I'll collect your files at the end." And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Just
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 amazing
tell them to
what's
shoot
possible.
horizontally, please. Landscape. Don't
Yes,
shoot vertically.
I've had
Yeah.
that's like, that conversation has been had many times.
Yeah.
They're learning.
Yeah. It's I got the 6S Plus was the first 4K camera that I have, and I still have it. As a matter of fact, it's right up here. I'm using it right now. I have Filmic Pro on the camera, which with that, until you take the display off, and then that's my 6S Plus right there, my overhead cam.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I use,
Good
this is
repurposing.
all, yeah, this is all Ecamm Live. This is the Ecamm Live setup. I have a program preview. I'm watching you run in the browser. I got all these different panels everywhere, comments coming in. But this is I can't get this on a 13-inch MacBook Pro. I'm not sure how
you could not. No.
How I would do that. Absolutely. So we have one other comment. Wes Plate, I am also an ultra runner in mountain. Good to hear you are a runner. Yep. Yeah, I didn't know that when I met you. Yeah, in 2019.
Yeah, well, when we met, I had started my journey in ultra running. I hadn't quite done some of these huge events yet, but man, it's been a real blessing for me in my life to be able to do this. And I like sharing the journeys on YouTube. I get a lot of great comments from people who watch this stuff. So yeah, whoever just commented, please check out the YouTube channel. You can follow. There's also this great website called Strava, which is a place where people share their running and biking activities. It's kind of like, I've thought about it, it's like Facebook of athletes.
Right.
It's not necessarily a social network as much as just a way to share what you're running. And anyway, I'm active on there with everything that I run. All my workouts are uploaded there as well. So yeah, I just love the sport. And so any opportunity I have to talk about it or talk about how I make the videos that document the sport, I love talking about it.
Look at you taking a break to eat. You're eating.
Yes.
What the heck?
Yeah. You have to eat a lot of calories, man.
I'm sure.
For 4.5 straight days.
I am sure.
Calories. Wow.
So that's great. And of course, you use Final Cut Pro to edit with it, all this stuff together. How long did it take you to finish editing once you got back after you took a break or took a sleep?
I think I had this video published to YouTube 3 weeks after the race was over. So I think I edited for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And like I said, that most of that time was spent kind of doing some fiddly work after the actual cut had largely been done. But yeah, I think I spent about 2 weeks on it. And of course, the nice thing was that I had a lot of time because I was giving myself the summer off. So didn't have a full-time job to go back to when the race was done. So I was able to just focus on the editing. And yeah, it was a lot. It was a really fun project to do. I had hoped to get it under an hour. It's 57 minutes.
There you go.
A challenge. There's a lot to show. A friend of mine in this race was also a YouTuber, and he and I had never met before this race. I had been following him on YouTube and enjoying his channel for many years, and he's kind of, I guess, well known in our little community. And he and I ended up running together for the second half of the race. And so he also made a video of this race, and his style is a little bit different than mine. His is a bit more about sort of interviewing people while we're running. He'll often turn his camera on and just record the conversation. So it's a great way to just sort of experience what it's like to be on the course. Because often when you're running these things, you meet other runners, and so you do have a conversation, get to know each other. Anyway, his video is 7.5 hours long, documenting this particular event. Just because we covered so much ground, and he had talked to so many people. So yeah, I guess in a way, maybe watching these endurance events can be an endurance event on its own. But
it was 7 hours for sure. Yeah, look at that, beautiful.
I think that I encourage people to check it out, because I think this might be inspiring, but it might also just be enjoyable. People might just have some fun watching what it's like for us when we do these events. Absolutely.
All right, Wes. Well, I hope I see you. I'm sure I'll see you sometime this fall, either NAB
you will.
or the Creative Summit or both. And I'll be interested to see what you're into at that point. It's been great having you on.
I sure did appreciate your invitation, and really enjoyed talking to you. Great to see you, Richard.
Absolutely, Wes. Thank you very much.